Welcome to The Bottom Line with Erick Bauer, a podcast that explores the intersection of storytelling, communication, and influence. In each episode, we sit down with leaders, creatives, and communicators who are shaping how stories are told. People who understand how to move an audience, spark a conversation, and leave a lasting impression. Because at the heart of great marketing, powerful leadership, and meaningful change is a story worth telling.
Today's episode is a very special one for me. Our guest, Martin Waxman, was one of my first mentors when I started out in this industry nearly 20 years ago. Back then, I was just finding my footing, and Martin was already a well-respected voice in the PR and communications world. Generous with his time, thoughtful with his approach, and always a step ahead of where the industry was going. Martin is a digital communications strategist, an educator, and a LinkedIn learning instructor. He is the founder of his own consultancy focused on helping organizations navigate AI and digital transformation. He teaches at the Schulich School of Business and McMaster University and has been a leading voice in conversations around ethics, emerging technology, and the future of communications. In this episode, we talk about how the industry has evolved and the skills that communicators need to stay relevant in an AI-driven world, as well as why curiosity and ethics matter more now than ever before. This is truly a full circle moment for me, and I think you'll get a lot from it. So without any further ado, let's dig in. So Martin, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Really excited to have this conversation with you. I have known you for a very long time and have watched you and your career trajectory over the last close to 20 years, I guess, since I've known you. And I've always been so impressed with how you've navigated the industry, navigated your career. So really excited to get your sort of take on the current state of communications. Maybe you can just start things off by introducing yourself and giving a little bit of your background.
Okay, thank you, Eric, and great to see you and be here. I feel like the first time we met in person, even though this is being recorded, but you were recording a podcast.
That's right. Yeah, that was
the
a long
PR
time ago.
program you were completing. So it's kind of nice to reconnect over a recording again, really.
It is very fitting.
Yeah, back then I had an independent PR agency that I co-founded with Louise Armstrong, my friend and partner, a business partner at the time. And we were just starting to get interested in social and digital media. I saw so much potential for PR and communications, and really marketing too, in social and digital media because, well, specifically for PR, it felt like it gave us permission to come out of the shadows and be more transparent, have a perspective, and really to be able to write and publish content, something that we were doing. Well, we weren't publishing it, but we were writing it. So that's my background. From the agency world, I kind of shifted out of that to digital and social media strategy consulting and training. Then I decided, after doing some teaching, to go back to school myself. I went to McMaster in their Master of Communications Management program, which is a fantastic program, and I would highly recommend it to working communications or even working marketing professionals, because what it does is it gives you the core of an MBA with strategy and finance and marketing courses, plus communications strategy, theory, and best practices and new practices. So in that program, I was first introduced to data science, from Professor Alex Sevigny, who's a good friend of mine. And that kind of opened my eyes more formally to the world of AI, which was a natural evolution from digital and technology. It just felt like a progression. But I had no background in computer science or coding. I still don't, but I was able to formalize my study of it, read more about it, and really, I think, get ahead of where we are today. So just an example of that, in 2019, my thesis or capstone project was called My BFF is a Chatbot, and it was about exploring human AI agent relationships. Well, fast forward to
And this was in what
2020,
year? Sorry.
2019.
Okay, so yeah, you were ahead of your time.
Yeah, so fast forward to now, and we have AI agents, and we're thinking about, okay, how is this going to affect the way we communicate, build trust? I'm writing a new newsletter now on ChatGPT's new all-encompassing memory feature, for example, that
Yeah.
remembers not only a chat in a certain, in your window or whatever, but it remembers everything about you based on all your interactions if you turn it on. And so I started thinking that pretty soon we're going to have these like nostalgic experiences with machines. You remember when I gave you that? And just again, how is that going to change the way we build relationships, the way we trust, the way we communicate, who or what we communicate with most often? I mean, in a way, it's mind-boggling, it's exciting, and it's terrifying, but I think it's important to think about all these things.
Yeah, and that's something that I really wanted to talk with you about. I think obviously, AI is absolutely, revolutionizing the way that we communicate, the way that we interact with each other. And I wanted to get your just your overall take on whether this is going to be a net positive for the communications industry or whether you see this as being a threat. I think at this point, it's safe to say there's not a lot we can do about it either way. I mean, the evolution is here, so to speak. But how do you see this impacting the industry over the next, say, 5 years in the short term, but then beyond that in kind of the mid to long term as well?
Okay, well, I think 5 years is the long term
True.
these
Yeah.
days,
Yeah.
especially, with what's going on in the world, but also with the pace of development. And it's hard to separate, the hype from the promise of what these tools can do or should be able to do. To me, every time I think of any AI development, I think of there's a duality to it. So you mentioned, the positive, there's always a negative. And I think it's really important for all of us to figure out a way of keeping that in balance. So when you're thinking about using AI to create a piece of content, a piece of written content, for example, how much of that process do you love to do? Like I love writing. Even the blank screen, I don't mind. Well, I hate it, but I don't mind it because to me it's a challenge. So the way some people might run a marathon, for me, it's like, okay, I'm going to get something written. And so I really don't want to give that up to a machine. So for a first draft, I'll use a machine to ask it questions, say, what's unclear? What do you think I might improve? Are there any grammatical inconsistencies? So that's how I balance the duality of writing. With image generation, it's very, very different. I'm not a graphic designer by any stretch of the imagination. And in fact, I've always struggled, say, with visual communications because, I know what I think looks good, but honestly, a designer, if given a chance, I would default to the recommendations of a designer. I'll give input, but certainly they know more about that. They're the subject matter expert. But I still like creating these images for any of my presentations. If I'm teaching or if I'm doing a training session, I'll create these AI images. I find that a fun thing to do. But I know if I showed my slides to a professional designer, they go, ooh, like, how can you possibly show that? But
Yeah.
again, that's part of that duality. I'm willing to give that up because it's not something that I personally love doing. And I think that that's an important consideration for all of us when we're using these AI tools.
Yeah, and I think it's a very individualized decision, right? And you talk about the blank screen and how that's something that you don't want to give up. I'm sure there's a lot of people on the other end of the spectrum who, despise staring into that blank screen and they need something to be on the page so that they can start to recreate it, sort of take inspiration and go in a different direction. But sometimes that starting point can be the biggest challenge, so that they would maybe have a different opinion, which is interesting. So I like
Oh,
that
yeah.
approach of individualizing it and using it in a way that is going to benefit you the most independently.
Oh, yeah. No, honestly, people I consider really amazing writers take a completely different approach to this. They want the AI to do a first draft and then they work it into something that's in their own voice. Whereas for me, I don't want it anywhere near that.
Yeah.
Maybe because of ego. I like to think I'm a better writer than a machine. Maybe it's because I'm so used to the process or the challenge or the struggle of taking an idea or concept that you have in your head and trying to fit it into something, some coherent type of story that makes sense to not just you, but to the people who you'd like to read it or engage with it. So I think that's the other thing. It's so individualized. And then of course there's all the policies around that too. If you're working for an organization, they will likely have tools that they've secured or procured that treat your proprietary data safely, or hopefully treat it safely. And there'll be places where you'll be encouraged to use AI, other places where you'll be discouraged from using it. So there's no one size fits all. In the same way, there's no one size fits all for anything creative, really.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's very true. I think even we're seeing it, the way that different organizations are approaching it, the way that different, entities are adopting it, or maybe are a little more hesitant. Interesting. We saw the leaked memo from Shopify a little bit earlier in the week about how any sort of hiring decisions can't be made before there's a real calculation on whether or not AI can do the job that is being sort of hired for. So I'm curious, like, do you think about it from a macro perspective in terms of how it will impact specifically jobs that are maybe a little more tactical when it comes to communications, jobs that are more junior? I know when you think about large corporations, they've got an eye on cost savings and efficiencies. Do you fear at all that AI will be a replacement for communicators when it comes to the job market?
Yeah, on a bad day I do. On a good day, I think, okay, no, well, we're going to get through this. And it's partially this pendulum I feel I'm on, w- feeling incredibly optimistic about all of the things that these tools can do that we haven't even thought of or tried. And then the flip side of it is that a lot of the work that we do, say in communications, in marketing, it's time-based, so you got to get it done by a deadline, and it has to be good enough.
Hmm.
And these tools now are exceptionally good at turning out not only good enough, but better than good enough content, visuals. And we see the improvements. Like if you look back 6 months, a year ago versus today, like so much better. Unfortunately, there's like this rush to the middle. If all we do is rely on AI to create this content, there's no personality, there's nothing unique. It's really dull, boring, somewhat informative, hopefully, prose or copy, but we don't necessarily have that little sparkle in it. Now, are most press releases filled with sparkle? No, they're pretty well formatted and they have to follow a certain pattern, with a quote and a lead. And so a good writer will try to do something to make it jump off the page, but we're all time crunched. And so that's the part that worries me. If it's only about costs, if we move into a recession potentially, some kind of economic downturn, companies will now start using these tools. And once they've shifted into relying on them, are they going to hire back all those people they used to have? Maybe not. But if they don't, will there be other opportunities? And hopefully there will be. I know for me, when I started writing, I thought I was just an way back when. And when I look at some of the things I wrote, I just kind of, want to say, oh my gosh, how could I have ever let that sentence with so many commas and clauses go out into the universe? Like, what was wrong with me? You
Yeah.
need to practice. And if we're offloading all our cognitive tasks to machines, will we get the practice?
Yeah.
So,
No, and it's a great question. I think obviously, another area I wanted to explore with you in that vein is you're actively teaching. You've been involved in the MCM program. Obviously, you're involved at Schulich in the Future of Marketing Institute and
yeah.
in some of the teaching there. So I wanted to get a little bit of a sense from you on how you are dealing with this in the classroom, because that's something that myself as well, as someone who's teaching at York, that I've had to kind of grapple with over the last year or so. And it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge to find the right mix. So what strategies work well for you when it comes to, bringing AI into the classroom and still ensuring that your students are being forced to, think for themselves, utilizing those critical thinking muscles, and bringing their own original thoughts to the table?
It's really difficult to balance this. And number one, because of the courses that I'm teaching, at Schulich and at McMaster MCM, but at Schulich primarily, say, Future of Marketing course, which really is somewhat speculative because we're looking at where things might be heading. All these different technologies, some of which are really popular now, some of which have diminished in popularity, like the metaverse, but there's still something there, augmented reality. How is that going to play out? So looking at all of those, or in a digital marketing class, I encourage students to use AI, but I want them to disclose how and when they're using it. I also want to see examples of prompts and what the prompting structure was. Did they just say, write this or do that? Or did they do something extra? Didn't you try to push them to do things in maybe a different way? So one of the assignments I encourage students to do is a digital marketing case study, but as a video. So they have to record a video. They have to research it and do all that work, and that's where AI can help. And then they have to record a video with them and edit
Yeah.
it creatively. And so all of a sudden, they have to think more about story, about presentation, and it gives them an opportunity to use their skills. But for some of the writing that they're doing, I can see they're relying more on AI, in part because I'm getting content or ideas that are similar. Because
Yeah.
again, if you prompt AI in a certain way, chances are if two or three people do it, you'll get a fairly similar type of output. And so that similarity isn't plagiarism, but it's dull.
Yeah.
So I try to encourage students to get beyond the dull, boring AI slop and put in some real effort, some creativity. Again, we don't want this to be a race to the middle. We want to use these tools to hopefully push us. We have a deadline. I don't think it's a great idea to say, okay, here's the AI output, let's go. Try to think 2 or 3 steps ahead. Say, okay, we've got a deadline coming up. AI can help us, but how can we make this absolutely stand out in a way that we haven't before? And I don't have the
Yeah.
answer on
Yeah.
how to
No, and
do that.
I think it's challenging, right? And I've found that the same principles have been effective for me. I know like in-class presentations have been valuable because again, you can use AI to prepare, you can use AI to do research, but at the end of the day, you still need to have a solid understanding of the topic that you're presenting.
Yeah.
Because if you're asked questions or if you're going to be presenting to a group, you need to be able to honestly showcase that you understand the subject and you can communicate it clearly. Otherwise, you're going to be, up there like a deer in the headlights. So I think small changes to sort of your assignments like that are really effective, and it'll be interesting to see how AI continues to be adapted to the classroom. But I do think that encouraging students to use it, but asking them and ensuring that they are open and honest about how they're using it is so key. Um, Another question I wanted to ask you, I think this is probably a question that is going through the minds of a lot of people right now. We know we're in sort of a period of economic turmoil, so to speak. There's talks of us going into a recession. There will likely be layoffs and job losses. And I wanted to get your thought process on, mapping your career trajectory, because you are someone who for 30 years, I think, has constantly reinvented himself. So you mentioned writing, you're a published author, founder of, I think, 3 different agencies slash consultancies. And then you made this decision to move to academia and reinvent yourself there. What has your thought process been throughout your career? Because you've made some pretty big decisions about, moving in a different direction. I'm curious to get your take on that.
Well, I've come to realize I have no attention span, clearly. No, that's not true. There's one thread I think that kind of holds everything I've done together, and that's writing. Everything I've done has been built around some type of writing. And it's why I love doing what I'm doing now. So my newsletter, courses for LinkedIn Learning, teaching at Schulich, and in the Future Marketing Institute, it's all centered on writing and creation and publishing. So I think that's what is the thread or the glue that's holding it all together. But I feel like if you're always curious, and you're kind of not only looking at what you're doing, but looking ahead a couple years, you want to think about, okay, where are we moving? And you have to gamble a little bit. AI may not have turned out like this. My timing couldn't have been more fortuitous, for example, with my focus on learning about AI and how it works and what some of the implications might be. But I think you have to kind of look ahead, figure out what you're doing, and know that, what I say to students, the only certainty about any job you'll get is that you will leave it.
Yeah.
And that's the only certainty. The question is, when are you going to leave it? Are you going to leave it, because you were dismissed, because the business changed, because you're being proactive about moving on to your next step? And it's tough when you have responsibilities, when you have a mortgage, when you have kids, a partner, but you still need to, I think, take risks. Had I thought at the time more closely about taking the risk, so leaving an agency job to start my own firm, I might not have done it. But there was one piece of advice that my dad gave me that goes counter to the advice that so many parents give their kids. And he said to me, "Don't get a job, work for yourself."
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was really interesting. And
Yeah.
when he said that, all I wanted was to get a job, right? But
Of course.
then I came to realize, oh yeah, that gives you it's a lot of uncertainty, but there's a certain feeling of control or of being able to steer your own path. And if I go back to when I started and kind of thought, like if I was me when I started and I was thinking about where I'd end up at this point in my life, I never would have predicted the path. But when I look back, it sort of makes sense. And it's not straight. And there were some detours and some dead ends that I hit. And it's like, whoops, okay, better, make a change there. And just knowing that you can wake up in the morning and hopefully enjoy what you're doing. Because if you hate what you're doing, if you're complaining about it, if you have an abusive workplace or boss, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
You got to make those changes. Because to my knowledge, we only have this one life. Who knows? Chatbots may give us a whole new one.
Yeah, no, and it's super interesting, right? I think you're such a great example of someone who has really, in my opinion, followed their passion, right? And the fact that you were able to, you talk about 2019 and sort of having this epiphany around AI and being really one of the early adopters in terms of the Canadian communications landscape anyways, to sort of, basically take that and run with it and really build yourself into a senior thought leader when it comes to AI. what do you see as being next for you? I mean, with the next 5 years and the uncertainty that brings, where do you see yourself going over the next 5 years?
Oh,
Or is
I
it something that you don't think a lot about? I
no,
mean,
no.
that's part of
I,
the
I
magic too,
don't
right?
think right now I'm not thinking as much about it because I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I really love teaching Future Marketing Institute, where we work with a group of students. It's really fun and interesting getting their perspective on the future because those students are going to be the ones who are living and working through it much more than I will. And so I really enjoy that. And I find I never realized how much I liked teaching until I kind of fell into it just by fluke, talking about social media, doing all
Yeah.
these guest lectures. And I realized how much I liked it. And then I kind of went back to school at an age where I was the oldest student in my cohort, just because I realized I needed to up my education. To me, education, teaching, learning is, and writing and thinking are the things that I'm most interested in doing. So as long as I can keep doing them, hopefully I'll be able to, you know, weave my way into whatever comes next.
Yeah, and I mean, I love that approach. I think I have, made a conscious effort to kind of do the same thing in my
Yes, you
my
have.
career to date, right? I think very similar to you, starting out in agency, then moving to client side. I've done some consulting, and then now for the last 6 or 7 years, teaching as well, which is again just like you, very much some sort of a passion that I fell into and I've really enjoyed. So I think it's funny how as you said, it looks very, it's not a straight line when you look at it from a 1,000-foot view, but one thing tends to lead to another, and you go in directions that make sense for you and the opportunities that are presented. If the door opens, you go through, you try it out, and like you said, sometimes it's a dead end, and sometimes it's something that you turn out to truly enjoy and pursue, right? Which is, I think, which is great. So I guess I would ask, on a similar vein, when I look at young students that I teach in my classes at York, I'm always asked about, what kind of advice would you give me as someone who's looking to cut their teeth in the industry? And I have my own theories and my own opinions on what they should be thinking about, but I'm curious to pose that question to you. If you know that things are going to be, really, really, I guess, you know, there's going to be a lot of change in the next 5 years. What advice would you give to students who are looking to maybe start a career in marketing or communications? What should they be focusing on? What skills should they be building? And what should they be really thinking about as they pursue their first jobs?
Okay, that now that's the $100,000 or $500,000
Yeah,
question, right? Yeah,
yeah,
really. And you mentioned the future. It feels like it's going to be tumultuous. That there's just
yeah.
so many different possibilities of what might happen, and there's so much that we don't know. It's funny when I started doing publicity after being, in the arts and entertainment industry, a TV writer and stuff. Um, there was a point at which I felt I knew how to do my job. Now, every day I wake up and go, okay, what do I have to learn today? And I think that's, in a way, the attitude you want to have. It's not as if you go to school, you get a skill, you finished your education, and I'm by far not the only person who says this. Lots of people say this, but your education continues throughout your life. As you see something new, you read something else, maybe you watch a movie, and you put together two or three signals in your mind and start to imagine a shape of um, how communications might change or develop. I mean, really, digital and social media was an incredible opportunity for communicators and marketers. It really was, because up till
Mhm.
then, we all had to rely on media. You know, small word, but it meant a lot because they controlled access to the audiences that we were trying to reach. and persuade and inform. And all of a sudden with social media, some of those gates came down, and we could now use our skills. I don't want to say to be journalists, because we weren't necessarily trained in journalism, but certainly to tell stories and use the techniques of journalism or the techniques of filmmaking to create these stories on behalf of our organizations, and then figure out what the distribution panel platforms are. So I think that is a really important thing, to just try to put those signals together. Always be curious. Try to put together signals in a way that might be a little different or counter to what everyone else is. Ask difficult questions. Challenge yourself. Don't always, go with the status quo because it's easier. And know that what you know today is likely going to be the bedrock for what you need to learn tomorrow, and a month after that, and a year after that, and 2 years after that. In terms of skills, I think writing and communicating are important skills for anything you do. It doesn't matter if you're a lawyer, an accountant, a doctor, communicator, marketer. You need to know how to communicate and how to build relationships and how to read the room. So how to understand what people are thinking when they may try to hide it. Sometimes they don't hide it too well. So I think those are important skills. And then trying all the tools and then stepping back and evaluating them, not getting lost in, the shiny new thing syndrome. Going, oh, that's amazing, that iPhone, my new iPhone, it's incredible. Think about what can you do with it. I think if you always are challenging yourself and trying to learn more, and being open, you'll do okay.
Yeah, no, and I love that advice. I think, it's that notion of being curious, of being proactive, of having an open mind. I think it's very challenging at this point to stay ahead of the curve, but at least staying kind of at the curve and understanding where things are moving and what direction, trends are going in is so important. And I like you said, we've seen even the last, not even 6 months, week by week, month by month, things are changing so significantly. If you are curious and you're building your knowledge of the area of AI, of communications, of digital, that I think speaks in and of itself for your ability to do a job that is essentially storytelling, right? And I do think there's an opportunity for communicators when it comes to AI, as was with digital and social, to be the kind of conduit between an organization and its audiences as a storyteller by using AI.
Yep, I do too. And knowing what the potential power of AI is if left to its own devices too.
Yeah.
Because we have to make sure that we are always adding something to that output. We're not just here to go, I need this, okay, done. I need that, okay, done. Otherwise, we'll lose that creative or strategic spark that I think is important for us to not only maintain, but to nurture. When I first started, I had a job as a copywriter at an ad agency. And I would go into these brainstorm sessions, senior writers and art directors, and they'd be throwing around ideas. And I would maybe have like a half-baked idea going in. I'd say it, and then I froze up. It's like, I don't know, that's my idea. I have no more. And so one day I asked my creative director, who was an incredible writer. He wrote about 5 or 6 books. He actually just passed away not too long ago at the ripe old age of 96, having just finished writing his latest novel.
Wow.
Incredible guy, Marty Myers, if you get a chance to read his books. But I asked him how he had so many ideas, and he said something I'll never forget, and that is, ideas are a renewable resource. The more you have, the more you get. I just thought, okay, so that means, or I took that to mean that the more ideas I try to come up with, the more ideas I will have. And I think that's something for all of us to remember. Sure, you want to get your ideas supplemented by an AI system. But if all you do is say, I need ideas, go to machine, we'll be losing that part of our brain that has to, again, see different signals and piece them together in hopefully a unique new way, a novel way.
Yeah, and I still think there's a lot to be said for, people crave information, but they crave real, solid, foundational
Yeah.
perspective, right? And I look at even your newsletter, for example. So you have a very successful digital marketing trends newsletter. I think over 500,000 subscribers. Like, what is it that do you think draws people to that newsletter when they could get that information by just throwing, some prompting and questions into ChatGPT? Why are they coming to you versus just going to an AI instead?
That's a question I ask myself every single day. It's part because of voice. A part of it, if I'm being honest, is the algorithm. So as a
Yeah.
LinkedIn learning instructor, LinkedIn likes to kind of give us a teeny little boost. So I think all of that works together. And then having a perspective that people find helpful or find interesting, or that they're hopefully not bored reading. I mean, they're short enough that if I'm boring you in about 700 words, I have no business saying what I'm saying. And I try to use storytelling techniques in the newsletter. So not only to be just straight factual or straight informative, how can I weave this into a story that makes the experience with it a little bit entertaining? Because honestly, these days, we're not just competing, like I'm not just competing with other newsletters. I'm competing with every single book that's being written, every single movie that's being shot, every video on TikTok, every TV show, every commentary. Like, we're competing with everything now. And so how do you carve out your own little niche there? And part of that just goes to finding your voice. What's your perspective? How does your personality play into this? And then building that into a story. Easier said than done. Oh my gosh, like if I think of my newsletters, the current one is a little late because I was away on the weekend. Usually I write them on the weekend. But it takes me 4 to 6 hours a week, at least, to write and publish one. I mean, could writing with AI shorten that? Maybe a little. I don't think a lot, because I really like to pick apart the prose and to do what Kurt Vonnegut said, was to edit my stupidity into something that resembles intelligence. That's a good one.
That's a good way of describing the process. Yeah, I like that. Well, and again, I still think with the rise of AI, we see this massive AI slop, right? And everybody now, you go on LinkedIn, you see so much generic content. But there is, I still think, this great opportunity for really strong content to stand above and apart from all the rest of the mediocre, AI slop.
Yeah, I do too. And really, you know what? To defend AI a little bit, there's a lot of human slop too.
Sure.
A lot of trade publications, you read them and you go, oh my, I'm not going to get through this article. It is so dull. And yet you need to get certain chunks of information out of it, or you want to get certain chunks of information out of it. So I think knowing that AI can be dull, humans can be dull, how can humans plus AI get beyond that and start to create things that we never imagined before? Different perspectives, different ideas, excuse me, different combinations of concepts and visuals that just work themselves into a story. Honestly, when you think of it, it's astonishing how many books are published every year. Plus, there's all the backlist, all the classics, all the other books. Like, how do we keep coming up with all these ideas? So, and if you ask yourself that and you think, okay, well, humanity keeps doing this. So now we have a tool that maybe can push us even farther. How do we use it versus a tool that becomes the lazy boy of writing? Oh, button, lie down, click. You know what I mean?
Right.
If that's all we use it for, shame on us, really.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think, it's so hard to predict where things will go and how it will change the future. But I mean, we've been through periods like this before, right? I think if you think about work pre the internet or pre-email, like how did
Yeah.
things get done? What was what did people do all day, right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
sure that some of those questions were asked then as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's so funny when I think of it. I used to like mail out press releases
Right.
to journalists. Like I put them in the mail. And if it was really important, if I wanted to catch their attention, I would spend the money and send it special delivery because psychologically they get all these envelopes and one says special delivery. Oh, I better open this up. But then I had to really deliver on what I was saying because if I did that too much, they just go,
Right in
garbage,
the bin.
garbage.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you capture people's attention? It was slower though. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it was so much slower. Do a news release in those days. Again, you either read it or email it to a client. They read it, they get it back to you. Yeah, or sorry, not email, mail it to a client or fax it to a client. So now
Yeah.
we can do things a lot faster, but the one thing that hasn't changed is our ability to process stories cognitively. Like
Mhm.
we can churn out way more stuff, but I can't read any more stories today than I read way back when. And probably I'm reading less because maybe they're more complicated. Certainly if they're about AI, I have to stop and think, what does that mean? What's the definition? How does this work? Whereas before, we understood it. So I think that's an important thing to remember too, knowing that people's attention spans haven't grown. How
Mhm.
can we make sure that what we give them gets our eyes to open a little bit wider and go, oh, okay, I'm going to
Yeah.
see what this is versus, mm,
Yeah, and in a world of kind of infinite clutter, how do you ensure that your story is going to resonate, right? I think
yeah,
that's the million-dollar question for sure. Well, I want to just wrap things up with one or two questions. Again, you've had such an incredible career, and you've, as I said, have reinvented yourself, and you've gone down so many different interesting avenues. Is there one or two kind of, I guess, career lessons that you learned later on in your life that you wish you would have known earlier on? Like, what would be some of the advice that you would give to those who are kind of, just starting or who are, 5, 6 years into their careers that you wish you would have had at that point in your career?
okay, no, that's a great question. One big piece of advice is never slam the door behind you. Sometimes you're in a working situation, and for you, it's just really bad. Maybe it's a cultural fit. Maybe you don't get along with your bosses or your managers, whatever it is. Maybe you just don't like the work. And so you're angry, 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 angry. That anger almost boils over, and then you decide to leave. Well, there's a good way of leaving and a bad way of leaving. One, try to keep a relationship. You don't have to say, this is the worst place I've worked for. This is the worst possible place in the world. I'm so glad to get out of here. Just remember, what goes around comes around. You never know who you're going to be working with again. So try to always leave with the door at least a little bit open. There's a good way to leave and a bad way to leave. And there's a couple of times where I think I probably left in, I don't want to say a bad way, but in a way that I really could have improved it. And that might have helped later on. And I think it's good because, relationships really do sprout and kind of like you're walking along, it's like, oh yeah, we've worked together before. You never know, because that one person who you hated may become your client, and maybe they hated the work too. So keep
Yeah.
the door open.
Yeah, I love that advice, right? And again, it's if there's two things that are going to endure, it's the power of storytelling and the power of relationships. And the
Yeah,
more you can nurture those relationships, even if it means, leaving a job, but leaving on good terms, you never know when that door will, kind of come back the other way, and there may be a new opportunity that you want to
yeah.
sort of pursue, right? So I think that's really great advice. And then my last question would be, and I don't know if this is something that you can answer, but I think it's an interesting thought, is there one trend in communications right now that you think is overhyped? And if not, is there one that's kind of being completely overlooked?
Let me ask ChatGPT.
Yeah,
No, just
that's it.
no, I think something that we're not paying as much attention to as I think communications people should. And again, it's very early days for this. So it's something 2, 3, 4 years down the road. That's augmented reality. The layer of storytelling that
Mhm.
is attached to the real world, on top of the real world. And you see little bits of this, but imagine, with our augmented reality glasses, you forget someone's name and you see them, and all of a sudden that piece of data is there in front of you in a completely subtle and non-intrusive way. And it's
Yeah,
just like it helps with that conversation, that relationship. If you're traveling somewhere and you don't know your way around, I mean, Google Maps offers this now. You can see arrows on, like, you hold
sure.
up your phone. It's really incredible, and it shows you arrows. The danger is that you're watching your phone and the arrows, and you don't realize you've walked into a street with oncoming traffic.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
augmented reality, I think, will help um, ensure that we don't, that we're able to blend the digital and real world together. And I think by doing that, we have to figure out, okay, how can we take these stories that we tell digitally and adapt them in a way that makes sense for the world? Because you're looking at something on your screen in front of you, that's great. But if I've got the whole world around me too, I need it, repackaged or reconceived in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's a fascinating thought, right? And I think, if nothing else, it's an interesting time to be in the business. It's an interesting time
Yeah.
to sort of, think about how marketing is evolving, communications is evolving, and certainly never a dull moment, which is always great. So thank you, Martin. That's fantastic. Again, I really appreciate your time. It's always good to chat with you, and I just want to say thank you for your thoughts, your inspiration, and all of the ideas that you've shared with our listeners.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. You made it easy. Yeah, I mean, it really is conversation. It's like, we could keep going for another couple hours. Thank you so much for inviting me.
That's great. All right. Thank you so much, Martin, and take care.
Thanks for listening to The Bottom Line with Erick Bauer. If you enjoyed the conversation, share it with someone who'd appreciate it. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes are on the way, and you won't want to miss what's next.